The sneering aliens of the Galactic Council were ashamed of their union with primitive backwater humans, as Edward Powell kneeled in the sterile crystal chamber and fumed at the indignity of it all, having no clue that man would soon ascend to demigod status. The council leader Corvus, a towering mantis creature of the Ctarian race, commanded Edward to stand. Various alien representatives ringed the chamber bird avis, reptilian saurians, and more insectoids like Corvus. The humans slowly rose, maintaining a defiant glare. Corvus spoke in a grating alien tongue, his meaning beamed into Edward's mind by neural implant. "Human, we require your barbaric skills for an urgent mission. The Orb of Eternity, an artifact of unlimited power, has been stolen by Ctarian extremists under the fanatic Zoltar. It grants the wielder immortal life. A living god could eradicate all non-Ctarian races if this madman keeps the orb." Edward smirked, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "And you can't send one of your advanced alien forces to handle this. Why exactly?" "The thief is Ctarian. Politically, we cannot interfere directly. But your kind have no such affiliations. You are unbound, and despite your feeble human shell, your species has a knack for succeeding against the odds. A useful trait. Will you accept this vital charge and retrieve the orb?" Edward pondered. "Save the galaxy and stick it to these condescending alien pricks? Fine, I'll clean up your mess." Corvus narrowed his compound eyes. "Be warned, human. Failure dooms the galactic races to extinction at Zoltar's hand. Only you stand between that madman and the death of worlds." As Edward turned to leave, he heard the sniping remarks of the alien council members, disgusted that a primitive Terran ape was entrusted with all their fates. He would show them the measure of a man before this was done. Edward stalked into the SS Spectre's cargo bay, his hands running over the sleek alien weaponry laid out on a table. The team was assembled there, each member carefully checking their gear. A holographic display flickered to life, projecting the grim visage of Corvus. "Human, we have assembled an elite unit to aid you in this critical mission. Meet Raven, our infiltration specialist." The avian alien nodded curtly, her feathers ruffling. "Rex here is our top marksman." The reptilian saurian flashed a toothy grin, his clawed fingers dancing over a high-powered rifle. "And Kaz, demolitions expert." The burly insectoid Ctarian glanced up from a glowing explosive charge, his mandibles clicking. "Charmed," Edward drawled. "Let's get this show on the road, shall we?" As the Spectre sliced through the void of space towards Kronos, Edward found himself the target of skeptical glances and hushed whispers. Rex sidled up to him in the ship's lounge. "So, human, you really think you're up for this? We're talking about the fate of the galaxy here." Edward met the saurian's gaze. "Guess we'll find out, but I didn't come this far to fail now." Suddenly, proximity alarms blared. The ship shuddered as asteroids pummeled its hull. Raven's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're caught in an asteroid field. Navigation systems can't handle it." Edward sprinted to the bridge, sliding into the pilot's seat. His hands flew over the unfamiliar controls as he wrenched the ship into a steep dive. The Spectre wove through the tumbling rocks, Edward's reflexes guiding them through impossibly narrow gaps. As the ship shot out of the field unscathed, Rex and Kaz stared at Edward, a newfound respect in their eyes. Raven nodded approvingly. Not bad for a human. The team made planetfall on Kronos, the Spectre's cloaking device masking their approach. They crept to the edge of a cliff, overlooking the ancient Ctarian temple complex. Its walls bristled with advanced weaponry, shimmering force fields encasing the structure. "We'll never breach those defenses head-on," Rex growled. "Who said anything about head-on?" Edward replied with a smirk. He pointed to a nearby cave mouth. "I say we go under. Use these tunnels to infiltrate from below." Raven shook her head. "Too risky. We stick to the plan, hit them with an orbital strike." As the team argued, an urgent transmission from Corvus cut through the chatter. The hologram flickered, static distorting his image. "The situation is critical. Zoltar is using the orb to destabilize Kronos' core. The planet will tear itself apart. You must hurry. Edward turned to his team, a hard light in his eyes. You heard the bug, let's move. With Corvus's grim warning ringing in their ears, Edward and his alien squad raced into the winding tunnel system. The human took point, his alien firearm at the ready, as shadows danced across the ancient stone walls. Kaz, the insectoid demolitions expert, scurried up beside him, compound eyes glowing in the darkness. The temple lies deep within this labyrinth, Kaz clicked, his mandibles twitching. The ancient Katarians built it to guard their secrets, and their traps. No sooner had the words left Kaz's mouth than a rumbling filled the tunnel. Stone slabs slammed down from the ceiling, threatening to crush the team. Edward dove forward, rolling under a descending slab as Rex and Raven scrambled back. They pressed on, navigating spike-filled pits and chambers lined with alien laser grids. Edward proved his worth, spotting hidden triggers and devising unconventional solutions. He used a loose stone to jam a closing door, allowing the team to slip through. When faced with a room of swinging plasma blades, he timed their movements, guiding the squad through unscathed. As they ventured deeper, glowing runes began to appear on the walls, pulsing with ancient power. Kaz ran a claw over the inscriptions, his eyes widening. These texts speak of Zaran, a Katarian scientist from eons past. He sought to harness the power of a dying star to imbue himself with immortality through the orb. The team exchanged uneasy glances as Kaz continued. But the power was too great, too unstable. It consumed him and brought ruin to our civilization. The orb was sealed away, its true nature hidden, until now. Edward's mind raced, pieces falling into place. Zoltar doesn't just want to live forever. He wants to become a god. As they approached a massive sealed door, a hidden chamber revealed itself. Inside, ancient tomes and schematics lined the walls. Kaz pored over them, his eyes darting across the alien text. The temple, the orb, it's all connected. The orb draws its power from the temple's energy grid. If we can overload that grid, we can nullify the orb, Edward finished, but we'll need a distraction. Rex hefted his rifle, a predatory grin spreading across his scaly face. Leave that to us, we'll give those extremists something to shoot at. As Rex and Raven peeled off, Edward turned to Kaz. Looks like it's you and me, Bug, let's fry this grid. Suddenly the ground shook as explosions echoed through the tunnels. Alien blaster fire and shouts of alarm followed. Kaz looked up from the schematics, meeting Edward's grim smile. It appears our distraction has begun. Edward's fingers flew across the alien control panel, his brow furrowed in concentration, as he rerouted power from the temple's secondary systems. Kaz worked beside him, his insectoid claws deftly manipulating the intricate circuitry. Almost there, Edward muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. Just a few more connections and... A searing blast of energy slammed into the wall behind them, molten rock spraying from the impact. Edward spun, his weapon raised, to see Zoltar standing in the doorway, the orb of eternity pulsing with malevolent power in his hands. You dare to interfere with my ascension, human, Zoltar snarled, his eyes blazing with madness. I will crush you like the insignificant pest you are. Edward rolled to the side as another blast scorched the air where he'd been standing. He fired back, but Zoltar deflected the shots with a wave of the orb's energy. Kaz leapt at the Katarian, his claws slashing, but Zoltar batted him aside with a casual backhand. Your feeble attacks cannot harm me, Zoltar crowed. I am invincible. And then he saw it. A flicker of strain in Zoltar's eyes, a tightening of his jaw. The orb's energy was immense, but it wasn't infinite, and Zoltar, for all his bluster, was still mortal. Edward charged forward, firing as he ran. Zoltar laughed, deflecting the shots with ease. But Edward kept coming, closing the distance between them. He ducked under a blast of energy, feeling the heat singe his hair, and slammed into Zoltar with a bone-jarring impact. The two grappled, the orb's power crackling between them. Edward could feel the energy searing his skin, but he held on, his human physiology somehow withstanding the onslaught. Zoltar snarled in frustration, trying to bring the orb to bear, but Edward's grip was unyielding. Behind them, Kaz staggered to his feet, his compound eyes widening as he saw the opening. With a clicking battle cry, the insectoid launched himself at Zoltar, tackling him around the waist. The Katarian fanatic stumbled, his concentration broken, and the orb's energy flickered. "Edward now," Kaz shouted, his voice strained with effort. "Finish the sequence." With a grunt of effort, Edward broke free of the grapple and lunged for the control panel. His fingers danced across the keys, inputting the final commands. The temple's energy grid hummed with power, the ancient machinery straining under the load. Behind him, Zoltar roared in fury, a blast of energy slamming into Kaz. The insectoid crumpled, his exoskeleton smoking, but his sacrifice had bought Edward the time he needed. With a final keystroke, the human activated the overload sequence. The temple shook as the energy grid surged, feedback cascading through the ancient systems. Zoltar screamed in agony, the orb's power turning against him as it was drawn into the vortex of the overload. Edward leapt for the artifact, his hands closing around its pulsing surface. Zoltar lashed out, his fists hammering into Edward's face and chest, but the human held on, his muscles straining with effort. With a final desperate heave, he wrenched the orb free of Zoltar's grasp. The Katarian fanatic staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No," he gasped. "This cannot be. I am a god." Edward stared at him, the orb's power thrumming in his hands. "You're no god," he said coldly. "You're just another megalomaniac with delusions of grandeur." Zoltar's face contorted with rage, but before he could act, the temple shuddered again, cracks racing up the walls. Chunks of stone rained down from the ceiling, the ancient structure collapsing under the strain of the energy overload. Edward turned to run, the orb clutched to his chest, but a massive slab of rock slammed down in front of him, blocking his path. He spun, seeking another route, but the temple was coming down around him, the way forward choked with rubble. Through the dust and chaos, he could see Rex and Raven fighting their way through the remaining extremists, blaster fire crisscrossing the chamber. But even as they cut down the last of Zoltar's followers, the temple's collapse was accelerating, the planet's destabilized core tearing itself apart. Edward looked down at the orb in his hands, its power pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He knew what he had to do. Closing his eyes, he reached out with his mind, feeling the ancient artifact's energy flowing through him. With a surge of will, he unleashed the orb's power, a wave of shimmering force expanding outward from his body. It enveloped Rex and Raven, encasing them in a protective cocoon of energy, even as the temple crumbled around them. Edward felt the orb's power suffusing his being, changing him on a fundamental level. Knowledge flooded his mind, the secrets of the universe unfolding before him. He saw the intricate dance of galaxies, the birth and death of stars, the very fabric of reality itself. As the temple collapsed in a final cataclysmic implosion, the protective barrier held, shielding Edward and his teammates from the destruction. The ground heaved beneath them, Kronos shuddering in its death throes, but they remained untouched, suspended in a bubble of shimmering energy. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The dust settled, the shaking subsided, and an eerie silence fell over the ruins of the temple. Rex and Raven stared at Edward, their eyes wide with shock and awe. Edward stood before them, his body suffused with an otherworldly glow. The orb of eternity hovered above his palm, its power now a part of him. He had become something more than human, more than mortal. "Edward," Raven whispered, her voice trembling, What happened to you?" Rex shook his head in disbelief. "A god? You?" Edward nodded, his eyes blazing with the orb's energy. "I can feel it, the potential within me, the ability to reshape reality itself. Kronos is saved, but there's so much more to be done." He looked out over the ruins of the temple, his gaze sweeping across the horizon. The Galactic Council, the alien races, they need a guardian, someone to watch over them, to guide them, and that someone is me. Raven and Rex exchanged a glance, the weight of Edward's words sinking in. They had come to Kronos as a team, a band of misfits thrown together by circumstance, but now they stood in the presence of a being beyond their comprehension, a human transformed into something greater than any of them could have imagined. The future stretched out before them, a universe of infinite possibilities, and at the center of it all stood Edward, the human god, ready to take on the mantle of protector and guide. The journey had only just begun, but one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. The SS Spectre streaked through the starry expanse, its sleek hull reflecting the soft glow of distant nebulae. Inside the ship, Edward sat in quiet contemplation, his eyes fixed on the pulsing orb of eternity that hovered before him. The power that coursed through his veins was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a constant thrum of energy that seemed to whisper secrets of the universe. Rex and Raven watched him from a distance, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. They had witnessed firsthand the incredible feats Edward had performed on Kronos, but the reality of his transformation was only now beginning to sink in. As the Spectre approached Zephyrus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, Edward felt a sense of unease wash over him. He knew that his newfound abilities would be met with suspicion and fear, even from those who had once looked upon him with disdain. The ship docked at the Council's headquarters, and Edward, Rex, and Raven were greeted by a throng of cheering onlookers. News of their victory had spread quickly, and the people of Zephyrus Prime hailed them as heroes. But as they made their way through the crowd, Edward could feel the weight of their expectations bearing down upon him. Inside the council chambers, the mood was far less celebratory. Corvus, flanked by his fellow council members, regarded Edward with a wary gaze. "Edward Powell," the Guitarian began, his voice echoing through the cavernous room, "you have returned victorious, and for that we are grateful. But the power you now wield raises concerns among the council." Edward met Corvus's gaze unflinchingly. "I understand your fears," he said, his voice steady, "but I assure you I have no intention of abusing this power. I seek only to use it for the good of the galaxy." Corvus's mandibles twitched. "And who decides what is good for the galaxy? A human with the power of a god at his fingertips." The other council members murmured their agreement, their eyes fixed on Edward with a mixture of fear and mistrust. Edward took a step forward, the orb pulsing in response to his emotions. "I am willing to submit to any tests or evaluations you deem necessary," he said, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. "I will prove to you that I can control this power, and that I am worthy of your trust." The council deliberated for a moment, their whispers filling the chamber. Finally, Corvus turned to face Edward once more. "Very well," he said, his tone grudging. "You will undergo a series of trials to assess the extent of your abilities. But know this, Edward Powell. The Council will be watching you closely. Any sign of instability or abuse of power will be met with swift consequences." Edward nodded solemnly, the weight of his responsibility settling upon his shoulders like a mantle. Over the next several days, Edward was subjected to a battery of tests and evaluations. His physical strength, reflexes, and durability were pushed to their limits, while his mental fortitude was probed by the Council's most skilled telepaths. But it was during the tests of his newfound abilities that the true extent of Edward's power became apparent. In a specially constructed chamber, he demonstrated his ability to manipulate energy, conjuring bolts of lightning and shaping them into intricate patterns. He altered the very fabric of space-time, creating localized distortions that defied the laws of physics. As news of Edward's godlike powers spread throughout the galaxy, the Council found itself inundated with requests and demands from various factions. Some sought to recruit Edward as a weapon, hoping to harness his power for their own ends. Others saw him as a savior, a being capable of bringing peace and stability to a fractured galaxy. Amidst the growing political tensions, a new threat emerged from the depths of space. The Void Wraiths, an ancient race from beyond the galaxy's edge, had sensed the orb's power and begun their invasion. Entire star systems were consumed in their wake, their inhabitants reduced to cosmic dust. Edward Powell, Corvus said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. The galaxy faces an existential threat, one that we cannot hope to overcome on our own. The Void Wraiths are unlike any enemy we have ever faced, and our only chance of survival lies with you. Edward looked out at the gathered council members, their eyes filled with a desperate hope. He could feel the orb's power surging within him, a silent promise of untold potential. I will face this threat, he said, his voice ringing with resolve. I will stand against the Void Wraiths, and I will use every ounce of power at my disposal to protect the galaxy. As Edward turned to leave the chamber, Rex and Raven fell into step beside him. They had been at his side through every trial and challenge, and they would not abandon him now. We're with you, Edward, Raven said, her voice filled with a fierce determination. Until the end. Rex nodded, his clawed hand resting on the hilt of his blaster. Let's show these Void Wraiths what happens when they mess with the wrong galaxy. Edward stood before the Galactic Council, the weight of their collective gaze pressing down on him. The Void Wraiths' advance had thrown the galaxy into chaos, entire systems falling before their relentless onslaught. Corvus leaned forward, his compound eyes glinting in the chamber's dim light. Edward Powell, the Council has come to a decision. We cannot hope to defeat this threat through conventional means. Your unique abilities may be our only chance at survival. Over the next several days, Edward worked tirelessly with Rex, Raven, and a hand-picked team of the galaxy's brightest minds. They pored over ancient texts and obscure scientific theories, searching for any clue that might lead to a weakness in the Void Wraith's seemingly invincible armor. It was Raven who made the breakthrough, her avian eyes widening as she scanned a series of complex equations. The Void Wraiths. They're not from our universe. They exist in a negative energy dimension, one that's fundamentally opposed to our own. Edward leaned in, his brow furrowed. So if we can find a way to cut them off from that dimension... The plan took shape quickly after that. Edward proposed the creation of a massive interdimensional weapon, one that could seal the breach between the Void Wraith's realm and their own. But to make it work, he would need to confront the Void King himself, in the heart of the invader's twisted domain. Armed with the Orb of Eternity and his newfound abilities, Edward prepared for the most perilous journey of his life. Rex and Raven insisted on accompanying him, but he refused. This is my fight, he said, his voice firm. I can't risk anyone else. As Edward stepped through the shimmering portal, he felt the orb's power thrumming through his veins. The landscape that greeted him was a nightmare made manifest, a twisting, churning hellscape of darkness and negative energy. Void Wraiths swarmed through the air, their hideous forms pulsing with malevolent power. Edward fought his way through the horde, his abilities tested to their limits. He hurled bolts of pure energy, tearing through the Void Wraith's ranks, but for every one he felled, a dozen more seemed to take its place. As he pressed deeper into the heart of the Void King's domain, Edward felt a presence brushing against his mind, a whisper of temptation and promise. You could be so much more, the voice purred, its tone seductive and alluring. Join me, and together we could rule not just this galaxy, but all of creation. For a moment, Edward wavered, the offer of ultimate power tugging at his very soul. But then he thought of his friends, of the countless lives depending on him. He thought of his human heritage, of the strength and resilience that had carried his species through countless trials. No, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. I am Edward Powell, a human of Earth, and I will not be tempted by false promises. He reached the heart of the Void King's chamber, a cavernous space filled with swirling shadows and pulsing malevolent energy. The Void King himself loomed before him, a being of pure darkness and hatred. Foolish mortal, the king hissed, his voice echoing through the chamber. You dare to challenge me in my own realm? Edward stood tall, the orb of eternity blazing with power in his hand. I dare, he said, his voice unwavering. For the sake of the galaxy, for the sake of all those who depend on me, I will defeat you. The battle that followed was cataclysmic, the very fabric of reality straining under the weight of their clash. Edward unleashed the full might of the orb, blazing beams of pure energy slamming into the Void King's dark form. The interdimensional weapon, a masterpiece of science and sorcery, hummed with power, the key to sealing the breach between dimensions. But the Void King was a formidable foe, his mastery over negative energy, allowing him to absorb and redirect Edward's attacks. Shadowy tendrils lashed out, seeking to ensnare and crush the human warrior. Edward dodged and wove. His reflexes pushed to their absolute limit. He channeled the orb's power through the interdimensional weapon, focusing its energy on the breach that connected the Void Wraith's realm to his own. With a final desperate surge of power, Edward unleashed the weapon's full potential. A blinding flash of light filled the chamber, the very air seeming to shatter and reform around them. The Void King let out a howl of rage and agony, his form dissipating as the breach between dimensions snapped shut. Edward felt the orb's power receding, his godlike abilities fading as the connection to the negative energy dimension was severed. Exhausted, battered, but victorious, he stumbled back through the portal, the Void Wraith's realm collapsing behind him. As he emerged on the other side, he was greeted by the sight of Rex and Raven, their faces etched with concern and relief. In the distance, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council were engaging the remaining Void Wraiths, the invaders now vulnerable and weakened without their connection to their dark realm. As the combined forces of the Galactic Council pushed back against the weakened Void Wraiths, Edward led the charge, his godlike powers decimating the invaders with devastating efficiency. Across countless star systems, the Allied forces clashed with the Void Wraiths in a series of intense battles, the fate of entire planets hanging in the balance. On the front lines, Edward unleashed the full might of the orb, his energy blasts tearing through the Void Wraith's ranks like a hot knife through butter. Rex and Raven fought alongside him, their weapons blazing as they cut down the invaders with ruthless precision. But even as they liberated system after system from the Void Wraith's grasp, Edward began to feel a growing sense of unease. His powers, once a source of strength and clarity, now seemed to waver and fluctuate, leaving him with brief moments of disorientation and memory loss. In the heat of battle, Edward suddenly found himself engulfed in a blinding white light, his consciousness ripped from his body. He floated in an endless void, his mind assaulted by a cacophony of whispers and images that he couldn't quite grasp. When he came to, he was standing amidst the ruins of a shattered city, his hands crackling with barely contained energy. Rex and Raven were at his side, their faces etched with concern. "Edward, what happened?" Raven asked, her voice tinged with worry. "You just now froze up. We thought we'd lost you." Edward shook his head, trying to clear the fog from his mind. "I don't know," he admitted. "It's like I blacked out for a moment, and these powers, they don't feel right anymore." As the campaign against the Void Wraiths wore on, Edward's episodes became more frequent and more intense. He began to question his own sanity, his mind plagued by a growing paranoia that something was deeply wrong with him. Desperate for answers, Edward sought out the Council of the Celestials, an ancient race rumored to possess knowledge of the orb's true nature. Following a trail of cryptic clues left behind in long-forgotten ruins and artifacts, he embarked on a solo quest to uncover the truth behind his transformation. His journey led him to the far reaches of the galaxy, to places untouched by civilization for eons. In crumbling temples and abandoned cities, he discovered hints of a pattern that had repeated itself throughout history, a cycle of destruction and rebirth, with the orb always at its center. As he delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding his powers, Edward began to suspect that his transformation had not been a random occurrence, but rather part of a larger plan set in motion by an unknown entity. The orb, he realized, was not just a tool for fighting the Void Wraiths, but a catalyst for something far more sinister. With growing horror, Edward came to understand that the true threat to the galaxy might not be the invaders he had been fighting, but the very power that coursed through his veins. The orb, and by extension his own existence, could bring about a catastrophe that would dwarf even the Void Wraith's invasion. Gripped by a sense of urgency, Edward raced back to the front lines, his mind reeling with the implications of his discovery. He knew that he had to find a way to end the conflict, to stop the Void Wraiths, and prevent the looming catastrophe that his own powers might unleash upon the galaxy. As he rejoined the battle, his resolve hardened by the knowledge of what was at stake. Edward prepared himself for the fight of his life. The fate of the galaxy, and perhaps the entire universe, now rested on his shoulders, and he would stop at nothing to see it through to the end. As the dust settled from his harrowing journey through the Void Wraith's realm, Edward returned to the front lines, his mind reeling with the implications of his newfound knowledge. But as he emerged from the interdimensional portal, he was greeted by a scene of utter chaos. The Void Wraiths had launched a desperate, all-out assault on Zephyrus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council. The invaders swarmed over the planet's surface, their twisted forms darkening the skies as they clashed with the Council's beleaguered defenders. Edward's heart sank as he realized that the Void Wraiths, despite their severed connection to their power source, seemed to have gained a second wind. He scanned the battlefield, his enhanced senses picking out a figure at the center of the maelstrom, a new, even more powerful Void King, directing the onslaught with malevolent purpose. Rex and Raven landed beside him, their faces grim. "It's now or never," Rex growled, readying his blaster. "We've got to take out that Void King." Edward nodded, his jaw set. He knew that confronting the Void King directly was the only way to end the conflict once and for all, to find a way to neutralize the orb's power. But a cold fear gripped his heart, the fear that doing so might also mean the loss of his own godlike abilities or even his life. Steeling himself, Edward turned to his companions. "We need to get aboard the Void King's flagship. It's the only way." Raven's eyes widened. "An infiltration mission? That's suicide." "It's our only chance," Edward said grimly. "We've got to try." The trio fought their way through the chaos of the battlefield, Edward's powers carving a path through the Void Wraith's ranks. They reached the looming bulk of the flagship, its hull pulsing with malevolent energy. Boarding the alien craft, they found themselves in a nightmarish labyrinth of twisting corridors and pulsing darkness. Hordes of Void Wraiths attacked from every angle, their shrieks echoing through the ship's halls. Edward, Rex, and Raven fought back to back, their weapons blazing as they pushed deeper into the heart of the vessel. Edward's powers flared, bolts of pure energy searing through the Void Wraith's twisted forms. At last they reached the command center, a cavernous chamber thrumming with dark power, and there, waiting for them, was the Void King himself. But as the figure turned to face them, Edward felt a shock of recognition. The Void King's form shimmered, resolving into a familiar face, Zoltar, the Katarian extremist who had originally stolen the orb. "You!" Edward snarled, rage and disbelief warring within him. Zoltar laughed, a sound of pure malice. "Did you really think you had defeated me, human? I have been working with the Void Wraiths all along, using the orb's power to further my own agenda, and now, with their might combined with mine, I will dominate this galaxy." Edward's mind raced, pieces falling into place. Zoltar's theft of the orb, the Void Wraith's invasion, it had all been part of a grand plan, a scheme to plunge the galaxy into darkness. With a roar of fury, Edward launched himself at Zoltar, the orb's power surging through his veins. The two titans clashed, their godlike abilities unleashed in a cataclysmic battle that shook the very ship around them. Energy blasts seared the air, the fabric of reality warping and buckling under the onslaught. Edward and Zoltar grappled, their forms blurring as they phased in and out of existence, tearing through dimensions in their struggle. As they fought, Edward began to see the truth. The orb was more than just a weapon, more than a source of power. It was a fundamental part of the universe itself, a nexus point where the strands of reality converged. And with that realization came understanding. The only way to end this cycle of destruction, to stop the orb from being used as a tool of conquest, was to absorb its power completely, to merge with it, becoming a living conduit for its energy. Edward knew what he had to do. In a final, desperate gamble, he unleashed the full might of his powers, drawing the orb's energy into himself. The process was agonizing, his body and mind stretched to the breaking point as the cosmic forces surged through him. But even as the power threatened to tear him apart, Edward held on, his human will unyielding. With a final, titanic effort, he channeled the orb's energy outward, banishing Zoltar and the remaining void wraiths to a pocket dimension, sealing them away from the galaxy forever. The smoldering wreckage of the Void King's flagship groaned and creaked, a twisted mass of alien metal adrift in the void of space. The once mighty vessel, now little more than a shattered husk, bore silent witness to the titanic battle that had raged within its halls. From the depths of the ruined ship, a shimmering figure emerged, a being of pure energy that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Edward, his human form forever changed by his merging with the orb of eternity, hovered above the debris, his ethereal presence casting an eerie light across the devastation. Rex and Raven, battered but alive, stared in awe at the transformed Edward. Gone was the flesh and blood of the man they had fought alongside, replaced by a being of pure cosmic power. "Edward," Raven whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of wonder and fear, Is that still you?" The luminous figure turned to face them, his features a shifting kaleidoscope of energy. When he spoke, his voice echoed with the power of 1,000 stars. "Yes, Raven, it's still me, but also something more." Rex, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward, his clawed hand resting on the hilt of his blaster. "What exactly have you become, Edward? What does this mean for the galaxy?" Edward's form pulsed with a soft, reassuring light. "I have become a conduit for the orb's power, a guardian of the universal balance. With this power, I can heal the wounds inflicted by the void wraiths and guide the galaxy towards a brighter future." As the trio made their way back to Zephyrus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, Edward could sense the trepidation and uncertainty that hung in the air. The council members, once dismissive of the human's role in galactic affairs, now regarded him with a mixture of awe and apprehension. In the grand chamber of the council, Edward addressed the assembled representatives, his ethereal form casting a soft glow across the room. "I understand your concerns," he began, his voice resonating with a soothing cadence. "But I assure you, my transformation is a gift, not a threat. With this power, I can help rebuild our war-torn galaxy and forge a new era of peace and cooperation." Despite initial reservations, the council members soon came to recognize the wisdom in Edward's words. Under his guidance, the galactic races began to set aside their differences, working together to restore the planets ravaged by the void wraiths. On the war-torn world of Ethan, Edward's presence brought life back to the barren, scorched earth. His luminous form hovered above the planet's surface, tendrils of energy reaching out to coax new growth from the ashen soil. Forests sprung up in his wake, lush and vibrant, while crystal-clear streams flowed once more through the healing landscape. Across the galaxy, similar scenes unfolded as Edward worked tirelessly to undo the damage wrought by the invaders. Shattered cities were rebuilt, their spires gleaming beneath alien suns, while displaced populations returned to their homes, their hearts filled with renewed hope. But even as the galaxy began to heal, Edward sensed a growing unease at the edges of his cosmic awareness. A malevolent presence, ancient and insidious, stirred in the depths of the universe, its tendrils of influence reaching out to corrupt and unravel the delicate balance he had fought so hard to restore. In the shimmering expanse of his mind, Edward saw visions of the Entropy Empress, a being of pure chaos and destruction, her form writhing with the primal forces of unmaking. He watched as she tore at the fabric of reality, reducing stars to cinders and planets to dust, her laughter echoing through the void like a discordant symphony. Realizing that this new threat was beyond the scope of any one race, or even the entire Galactic Council, Edward knew he would need to seek out allies and knowledge from the farthest reaches of the universe. With a heavy heart, he bid farewell to his companions and set out on a new journey, his luminous form streaking across the starry expanse like a comet. As he ventured beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy, Edward encountered wonders and horrors beyond imagination. On the crystalline world of Luminos, he met a race of beings composed entirely of living light, their wisdom as ancient as the stars themselves. In the haunted nebula known as the Whispering Vale, he confronted the ghosts of long-dead civilizations, their anguished cries a testament to the Entropy Empress's destruction. With each new encounter, Edward grew in knowledge and power, his cosmic awareness expanding to encompass the intricate web of connections that bound the universe together. He began to assemble a team of extraordinary individuals, each possessing unique gifts and abilities that would prove invaluable in the battles to come. There was Zephyr, the Wind Rider of Aeolus, whose mastery over the currents of air and space allowed her to navigate the most treacherous regions of the cosmos. Jax, the psionic warrior of Mentarian, whose mind was a weapon of unparalleled precision and power. And Naya, the Aquarian shapeshifter, whose fluid form could adapt to any environment or challenge. Together, this unlikely band of heroes set forth to unravel the mysteries of the Entropy Empress and find a way to stop her before she could unmake the very fabric of existence itself. The fate of the universe hung in the balance, and Edward knew that failure was not an option. As Edward and his extraordinary team ventured deeper into the uncharted reaches of the cosmos, the malevolent presence of the Entropy Empress loomed ever larger in their minds. The ancient ruins and celestial wonders they encountered held clues to her origins and the source of her power, a primordial artifact known as the Heart of Chaos. "It's the key to her existence," Zephyr said, her eyes scanning the holographic star charts. "If we can find it, we might have a chance to stop her." Edward nodded grimly, the weight of the universe on his shoulders. "Then that's our mission. We find the Heart of Chaos no matter the cost." Their search led them to a long-forgotten corner of the universe, a desolate expanse where the very fabric of reality seemed to fray at the edges. As they approached the coordinates, their ship was suddenly rocked by a wave of turbulence, the stars outside the viewport warping and twisting in impossible patterns. "We're crossing into her domain now," Jax warned, his psionic senses on high alert. "I can feel her presence like a cancer on the universe itself." The team steeled themselves as they landed on a bleak, lifeless world, the surface scarred by eons of cosmic upheaval. Before them, a massive obsidian structure loomed, its jagged spires piercing the sickly green sky. "The Heart of Chaos is inside," Edward said, his voice tinged with a grim certainty, "along with the Entropy Empress herself." As they approached the structure, a series of deadly traps and guardians sprang to life, the ancient defenses still potent after countless millennia. Naya, in her fluid form, flowed through the narrow passages, disabling the mechanisms from within, while Zephyr's mastery over the winds allowed her to navigate the team through the treacherous, gravity-defying corridors. Even Edward, with his godlike powers, found himself tested to the limit as they fought their way deeper into the structure. The Guardians, twisted amalgamations of organic and mechanical components, seemed to draw strength from the Heart of Chaos itself, their attacks relentless and unyielding. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a vast cavernous space dominated by a pulsing obsidian crystal, the Heart of Chaos. And there, waiting for them, was the Entropy Empress herself. She was a being of pure primordial chaos, her form constantly shifting and changing. Like a kaleidoscope of fractured reality, her very presence seemed to unravel the fabric of existence, the air around her shimmering with a sickening, otherworldly light. "You dare to challenge me?" she hissed, her voice a discordant chorus of 1,000 whispers. "I am the end of all things, the inevitable collapse of order into chaos. You cannot hope to stop me." But Edward and his team stood firm, their resolve unshakable in the face of annihilation. They unleashed the full might of their powers, cosmic energies clashing against the entropic forces of the Empress in a cataclysmic battle that shook the very foundations of the universe. One by one, Edward's allies fell, their life force consumed by the relentless onslaught of chaos. Zephyr, her body broken and twisted by the Empress's dark magic. Jax, his mind shattered by the psychic backlash of the heart's power. Naya, her fluid form evaporated by the searing heat of entropy. In the end, only Edward remained, battered and bloodied but still standing. And in that moment he understood what had to be done. With a heavy heart, he reached out to the heart of chaos, his godlike essence intertwining with its primordial power. The agony was beyond anything he had ever experienced, his very being torn apart and remade in the crucible of the artifact's energy. As he absorbed the heart of chaos into himself, Edward felt the full weight of its cosmic responsibility settle upon his shoulders. He had become the living embodiment of the balance between order and chaos, a god in truth, forever tasked with maintaining the delicate equilibrium of the universe. He turned to face the Entropy Empress, his once human form now a blinding matrix of pure cosmic energy. With a thought, he unmade her, her essence scattered to the far corners of the universe, the threat of entropy forever banished from the cosmos. But the price of victory was high. Edward knew that his ascension had forever cut him off from the mortal realm, from the friends and allies he had fought alongside for so long. With a bittersweet smile, he bid them farewell, entrusting them with the task of rebuilding and protecting the galaxy in his absence. As he ascended to a higher plane of existence, Edward caught one final glimpse of the universe he had fought so hard to save. It was a galaxy forever changed by his actions and his sacrifice, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity and the power of unity in the face of darkness. The Galactic Council, humbled by the events that had transpired, began to integrate human representatives into its ranks, acknowledging the crucial role that humanity played in the cosmic balance. The loss of Edward was felt keenly by all who knew him, but his legend lived on, a shining beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.